We're going to talk about the one-drop wonders of BloomBurrow coming right up. Hey, thanks for joining me here at Wizard's Whimsy. We're taking a look at the one-drop wonders for the weenie decks, or utility creatures that can be used. We're taking a look at the black creatures first. We're looking at Bone Cash Overseer. He's a one-drop, 1/1 creature. He's a squirrel warlock. He has tap, pay a life, draw a card, activate only if 3 or more cards left your graveyard this turn, or if you've sacrificed a food this turn. This set does have food, and depending on what deck you build, it's very easy to turn this on to be able to use this as a source to draw cards. And with a cost of 1 mana and tap to pay 1 life to draw a card, it's pretty simple to use, and all you got to do is sacrifice a food, or if you have some kind of reanimate or exile effects, you can use him in those type of decks as well. Next up, we have Ravine Raider. He's a 1-drop, 1/1 lizard rogue. He has menace. Pay a generic and a black. Ravine Raider gets a +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, this one might not see that much play because you do have to sink mana in it to make it bigger and bigger, but it is a 1-drop that you can easily turn into a 2/2 with menace to get in for that little bit of extra damage. Iridescent Vine Lasher. Now, this lizard assassin is a 1/2 1-drop. Has Offspring 2. You may pay an additional 2 mana as you cast this spell. If you do, when this creature enters, create a 1/1 token copy of it. Now, the copy also has the same mana cost, and it also has the same ability of this creature has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. The copy will also deal that damage. With them introducing Fabled Passage into the set, it is definitely a strategy that can be utilized, and it's definitely one of those 1-drops to look out for. Blue has only 1/1-drop in it, and it is Mockingbird. It is X and a blue. He's a 1/1 bird bard. As flying, you may have Mockingbird enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to its other types, and it has flying. Now, this card is a great little clone that can be used in multiple formats. And, I mean, you could literally, if you have the mana, have you a flying Blightsteel Colossus as a win condition. So introducing this clone and introducing it to where you can scale it depending on what turn you're on and how much mana you have available. I think this is a very good card. Not sure what decks it will make it into, but it is definitely one of the 1-drop weenies to keep an eye out for, because I have a feeling that this thing can do a lot of different stuff. Looking at the red creatures, we have 2 of them. We have Heartfire Hero, 1 red, Mouse Soldier, 1/1, has Valiant. Whenever Heartfire Hero becomes the target of a spell or an ability you control for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Heartfire Hero dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. This creature is definitely scalable, and with some of the 1-drop instants and sorceries and different artifacts that you can equip, this creature could get pretty big pretty quick. The downside is that the ability only triggers for the first time each turn, so you have to make sure you hold mana up in an instant speed to utilize it on your opponent's turn. And just think about it, whenever he dies, deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. This creature is definitely one to look out for. I have a feeling that it can do some crazy stuff, and bring it into the older formats and introduce fling or a way to sack it, and sure enough, you can kill your opponents pretty quick. The second red creature is Hired Claw. He's a 1/2 lizard mercenary. Whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. You can pay a generic and a red, put a +1 counter on Hired Claw, activate only if an opponent lost life this turn, and only once each turn. Hired Claw pairs well with Vine Lasher, so you could look at probably seeing this in some kind of a Rakdos build. We have 3 1-drops in white. We have Bravekin Duo, Rabbit Mouse 1/1, has pay 1 tap. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Activating it only sorcery really shuts this card down a whole lot. I'm not sure how much you'll actually utilize this in a weenie deck. I believe that there are probably better options, but if this is the colors that you're into, then that extra little buff could help push one of those creatures ahead to either kill a creature your opponent controls or get in for that final damage. Flowerfoot Swordmaster is a 1/2 mouse soldier, has Offspring 2. Again, paying an additional 2 mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you create a copy of it when it enters. It has Valiant. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability you control for the first time each turn, mice you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. This card could be good if you have any mice that have First Strike, because you can buff up to where they can swing in, kill a creature. If you do it on your opponent's turn, you can utilize that creature to block with, and getting that buff, it does help out a little bit. But again, it only works for the first time each turn, so they did kind of shut these down a little bit and made the 1-drop wonders a little worse. But it is still a viable card to use, especially if you're trying to go with a Kindred or Tribal mouse deck. And the last white card that is a 1-drop wonder is Seasoned Warren Guard. It's a Rabbit Warrior 1/2. Whenever Seasoned Warren Guard attacks while you control a token, Seasoned Warren Guard gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So essentially, as long as you have a token, you're swinging in with a 2/2, which is pretty decent, especially if you're going wide. The more creatures you have and the more power they have, it'll force your opponent to make some bad blocks at times. Of course, if you swing in and you don't have a way to actually break through and get through, you'll just end up sacrificing your creatures to die on the crackback. Now we're looking at the green cards, and let me tell you, these 1-drops, if you're playing a deck that cares about +1/+1 counters, these are some definite cards that you could include into a green deck or some form of a green X deck, and I think it would do very well. We're going to look at Mist Breath Elder. He's a 2/2 Frog Warrior. At the beginning of your upkeep, return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Mist Breath Elder. Otherwise, you may return Mist Breath Elder to its owner's hand. So, as long as you have a creature that has a enter the battlefield effect, you can bounce it to your hand and then replay it. You'll get a counter on him, and then possibly whatever ETB happens with that other creature, that happens again. So it gives you a way to use those creatures that have a enter the battlefield effect that only happens once. So this is definitely a good card to utilize, especially if you're caring about those +1/+1 counters. Paw Patch Recruit. He's a 2/1 Rabbit Warrior. He has Offspring 2, so paying that 2 additional, you can make a copy of him. And he has Trample. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control other than that creature. So whenever your opponents are trying to remove one of your creatures, do a spot removal, maybe put an enchantment on them or anything like that, well, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a different creature with him out, and having a copy of him out, that's 2. So anytime your opponent targets one of your creatures, you'll be able to put 2 +1/+1 counters on him as long as you paid that Offspring cost. Sun Shower Druid. He's a Frog Druid. 0/2. When he enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and you gain 1 life. So again, with bouncing him back to your hand, it's a repeatable thing to where you gain life and you get to buff your other creatures. Valley Might Caller is the final 1-drop. He is a frog warrior 1/1, has trample. Whenever another frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on Valley Might Caller. So again, this one here is definitely a good card to have. It's going to put those counters on him anytime that you're playing a frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel, and it's repeatable. So as long as you're playing those low drops that put +1/+1 counters on, you can bounce back and forth and just make this little 1-drop a huge problem since he does have trample. I want to thank you for checking out this video. It means a lot to me that you took the time to watch this video. Please hit that subscribe button, like button, and leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this content and what I can do to improve. Until next time, keep slinging those spells.